Captain Jake Morrison stared at the main screen of his ship, the New Horizon. What he saw made no sense at all. The scanner showed something huge floating in space ahead of them. It was not a planet or a star. It was something else entirely. "Lisa, bring us closer," Jake said to his pilot. Lisa Grant had been flying ships for 10 years and had never seen anything like this before. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. "That thing is massive, Captain," said Tony Chen from the engineering station. "It's 50 times bigger than our ship. Maybe more." Tony wiped sweat from his forehead. The readings on his instruments were off the charts. Amy Sullivan, their medic, looked up from her medical scanner. "I'm getting strange energy readings. Whatever that thing is, it's still active after who knows how long out here." Carlos Rivera, their communications officer, shook his head. "I'm not picking up any signals from it. But there's something weird about the way it looks. The surface keeps changing when I'm not looking directly at it." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "We're going to investigate. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. Shouldn't we report this to Earth Command first?" Amy asked. She was always the careful one on the crew. "If we report it now, they'll send a whole fleet and we'll get pushed aside," Jake replied. "This is our chance to make history." The alien ship grew larger and larger on their screen as they approached. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The hull was covered with patterns that seemed to move and shift. Colors flowed across the surface like liquid light. "Captain, look at this," Lisa said, her voice full of surprise. "A docking bay just opened. It's like the ship knows we're here." Jake felt his heart racing. "Take us in, Lisa." Slowly. The New Horizon slipped into the alien vessel through the opening. Inside, everything was dark except for a soft blue glow coming from crystal formations along the walls. The air was thick and smelled like the air after a lightning storm. "The atmosphere is breathable," Amy reported, checking her instruments, "but there's something in it that might make us feel dizzy." Jake stood up from his captain's chair. "Tony, Lisa, Carlos, you're with me. Amy, stay with the ship and monitor our vital signs." The 4 humans put on their spacesuits and left their ship. The moment they stepped onto the alien vessel, lights began to turn on around them. The crystals in the walls pulsed brighter, as if responding to their presence. The corridors were huge, built for beings much larger than humans. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing softly in the artificial light. Jake felt like they were walking through a cathedral made of living crystal. "This technology is incredible," Tony whispered. "These crystals seem to be some kind of computer system. They're scanning us." They walked for what felt like hours through the massive ship. Every step took them deeper into something beyond human understanding. The corridors led them upward and inward, toward what seemed to be the center of the vessel. Finally, they reached a vast chamber. The ceiling was so high they could barely see it in the dim light. At the far end of the room sat a throne made of the same shifting, changing material as the ship's hull. On the throne sat the most beautiful and terrifying creature Jake had ever seen. She was tall, maybe 8 feet, with 4 arms and skin that seemed to contain tiny stars. Her eyes were like looking into deep space itself. "Welcome, humans," she said in perfect English. Her voice was like music and thunder at the same time. "I am Queen Zylara of the Vorthak Empire, or what remains of it." Jake found his voice with difficulty. "How do you know our language?" The Queen smiled, and it was both kind and sad. "I scanned your minds when you entered my ship. Your species is young but interesting. You have something my people lost long ago. What's that?" Carlos asked. "The will to fight for what you believe in," Queen Zylara replied. "My people were once the greatest empire in the galaxy. We had technology beyond your wildest dreams. We had the power to create stars or destroy them with a thought." Tony's eyes went wide. "Create stars?" "The Stellar Forge," the Queen said, gesturing to somewhere deeper in the ship. "The most powerful weapon ever created. With it, one can reshape the galaxy itself." Jake felt his mouth go dry. A weapon that could create or destroy stars would make humanity the most powerful species in the galaxy. Or it could destroy them completely if someone else got their hands on it. "Why are you telling us this?" Jake asked. Queen Zylara's expression grew darker. "Because my people are all dead. We were conquered by a species called the Devourers. They spread across the galaxy like a plague, destroying everything in their path. They are coming to your region of space, and when they arrive, your people will face the same fate as mine." The humans looked at each other nervously. They had heard rumors of an aggressive alien species expanding outward from the galactic core, but Earth Command had dismissed them as unconfirmed reports. The Stellar Forge could protect your people, the Queen continued. It could give you the power to stand against the Devourers. But such power must be earned, not given freely. What do you want us to do? Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Queen Zilara stood from her throne, towering over them. There is something the Devourers took from my people during our final battle. The Crown of Sorrows, a sacred artifact that once belonged to my ancestors. It is kept on their homeworld, in their most holy temple, guarded by their greatest warriors. Jake felt his heart sink. You want us to steal it back? I want you to prove that humanity deserves to inherit the power of the Vorthak Empire, the Queen said. If you can retrieve the Crown of Sorrows from the heart of the Devourer homeworld, I will give you the Stellar Forge and all the knowledge of my people. Lisa spoke up for the first time. That sounds like suicide. Queen Zilara nodded. It probably is. But if you succeed, your species will have the tools they need to survive what is coming. If you fail, you will die as heroes, and perhaps that is better than living as slaves under Devourer rule. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but he could see determination in their eyes. They all knew what was at stake. Earth needed protection, and this might be their only chance to get it. We'll do it, Jake said. Queen Zilara smiled again, and this time it was full of hope. Then let me tell you about the world of Kethmaran, and the impossible task that awaits you there. Queen Zilara led the humans deeper into her ship. The walls around them showed moving pictures of planets, stars, and great battles fought long ago. Jake watched in amazement as he saw the rise and fall of the Vorthak Empire. My people ruled for 1,000,000 years, the Queen explained as they walked. We built cities that touched the clouds and ships that could cross the galaxy in days. We thought we were invincible. The pictures on the walls changed, showing dark ships attacking beautiful worlds. Jake saw cities burning and people running in terror. The Devourers came from beyond the galactic rim, Queen Zilara continued. They were not like us. We created and built. They only consumed and destroyed. We thought our technology would save us, but we had grown soft over the centuries. We had forgotten how to fight. They reached another chamber filled with strange machines and glowing screens. Tony stared at the technology with wide eyes. It was far beyond anything humans had ever built. This is where I will show you Kethmaran, the Queen said. She touched a control panel, and the air above them filled with a three-dimensional image of a planet. Kethmaran was a world of dark cities and smoking factories. Massive ships moved around it like angry insects. Jake could see that the entire planet was one huge fortress. The Devourer homeworld, Queen Zilara said. 20 billion of them live there, each one bred for war. Their capital city covers half the northern continent. That is where they keep the Crown of Sorrows. The image zoomed in on a huge pyramid made of black stone. It stood in the center of a city that stretched beyond the horizon. The Temple of Victories, the Queen explained. Inside they keep trophies from every world they have conquered. The Crown of Sorrows sits in the deepest chamber, surrounded by their most sacred guards. Carlos whistled softly. How are we supposed to get past all of that? Queen Zilara waved her hand, and the image changed to show patrol routes, guard schedules, and defensive systems. I have watched them for a long time. I know their patterns. Once every year they hold the Festival of Conquest. During this time, many of their ships return to the homeworld, and security becomes focused on the celebration rather than defense. Lisa studied the patrol routes. Even during the festival, there are still thousands of guards. That is where this comes in, the Queen said. She opened a small box and took out a device that looked like a metal bracelet, a Vorthak personal cloaking device. It can hide one person from all sensors and make them nearly invisible to the naked eye. Jake took the device and felt its weight. It was surprisingly light for something so advanced. How long does it work? 6 hours at most, Queen Zilara replied. After that, it needs time to recharge. You will have one chance to reach the Crown of Sorrows and escape with it. Amy had been quiet during the explanation, but now she spoke up. What about the rest of us? We can't all use the cloaking device, the Queen nodded. The others will need to create a distraction. Something big enough to draw the guards away from the temple, but not so obvious that they realize it is a diversion. Tony was already thinking like an engineer. If we could cause some power failures in other parts of the city, it might work. Make them think there's an attack happening somewhere else. The festival will help, Queen Zilara added. With so many ships grounded and so many Devourers celebrating, chaos will spread quickly once it starts. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but he could see they were also determined. They all knew what would happen to Earth if the Devourers reached human space. "What do we know about their defenses?" Jake asked. The Queen showed them more images. Massive gun batteries surrounded the planet. Energy shields protected the major cities. Patrol fleets moved in careful patterns through space around Kethmoran. "Their technology is stolen from the races they have conquered," Queen Zalara explained. "They are not inventors like my people were or like yours. They take what others have built and use it for war. This makes them strong, but it also makes them predictable." Lisa studied the ship movements. "If we could get the right identification codes, we might be able to slip through their patrols." "I can provide you with captured Devourer communication protocols," the Queen said. "But they change their codes regularly. You will need to be very careful." Carlos looked worried. "What if we get caught before Jake even reaches the temple?" Queen Zalara's expression became serious. "Then you will die. But you will die knowing that you tried to save your species. That is more than most beings can say." The humans spent the next several hours studying everything the Queen could show them about Kethmoran. They learned about Devourer culture, their military structure, and their religious beliefs. The Crown of Sorrows was not just a trophy to them. It was a symbol of their greatest victory. "Why is the crown so important?" Jake asked. Queen Zalara's eyes grew sad. "It belonged to the last Vorthak Emperor. When the Devourers killed him, they took his crown as proof of their victory. For my people, it represents everything we were and everything we lost." Tony had been working on his tablet, running calculations. "Captain, I've been looking at the numbers. Even with the festival distraction and the cloaking device, our chances of success are less than 1%. Amy nodded grimly. "And that's assuming everything goes perfectly." Jake looked at each of his crew members. "I won't order any of you to do this. It has to be your choice." Lisa was the first to speak. "Earth needs that weapon. If the Devourers are really coming, this might be our only chance to get it." Carlos agreed. "My family is on Earth, my kids. If there's even a small chance we can protect them, we have to try." Tony and Amy looked at each other, then nodded. "We're with you, Captain," Amy said. Queen Zalara watched this exchange with interest. "This is why your species might succeed where mine failed. You are willing to sacrifice for others, not just for yourselves." She led them to another chamber where a smaller ship waited. It was sleek and fast-looking, built for stealth rather than combat. "This ship has been modified with Vorthak technology," the Queen explained. "It can mimic other ship signatures and slip through most detection systems. Use it to reach Kethmoran." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They were about to attempt something that was almost certainly impossible. But if they succeeded, they would save not just Earth, but potentially every free world in the galaxy. "When is the next Festival of Conquest?" he asked. Queen Zalara consulted a device on her wrist. "In 18 days. That will give you time to reach Kethmoran and prepare." As they prepared to leave the Queen's ship, she gave Jake one final piece of advice. "Remember, Captain Morrison, the Devourers conquered my people because we forgot what it meant to fight for something greater than ourselves. Do not make the same mistake." Jake nodded and put on the cloaking device. It felt warm against his skin, almost alive. "We won't let you down," he promised. Queen Zalara smiled. "I believe you won't. Now go, and may the stars watch over you on your journey into darkness." The journey to Kethmoran took 15 days through the most dangerous space any of them had ever seen. The Vorthak ship moved like a ghost through systems filled with Devourer patrol fleets. Lisa's hands never left the controls as she guided them past massive warships that could have destroyed them with a single shot. Jake watched the scanner displays and felt sick to his stomach. Every system they passed through showed signs of recent conquest. Dead worlds floated in space, their surfaces blackened and lifeless. Broken ships drifted in orbital graveyards around planets that would never see life again. "Look at this," Carlos said, pointing to his communication screen. He had been listening to Devourer broadcasts, learning their language and military codes. "They're bragging about taking 17 worlds in the last month alone." Amy shook her head in disgust. 17 entire civilizations just wiped out. "That's why we're here," Jake reminded them. "To make sure Earth doesn't become number 18. On the 10th day of their journey, they found something that changed everything. A small group of ships was hiding in an asteroid field, clearly damaged and running on emergency power. Lisa brought their ship closer, and they could see these were survivors from one of the conquered worlds. "Should we help them?" Amy asked. As a medic, she couldn't stand to see beings suffering. Jake made the decision to dock with the largest survivor ship. When they opened the airlock, they met Captain Vex, an alien who looked somewhat like a tall, thin human, but with gray skin and large black eyes. "Humans," Vex said in broken English. "What are you doing in Devourer space?" Jake decided to tell him the truth. "We're going to Kethmaran to steal something from them." Vex laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "That is suicide. But I admire your courage. The Devourers destroyed my homeworld 3 days ago. My people fought bravely, but it made no difference. Maybe you can help us," Tony suggested. "Do you know anything about their homeworld defenses?" Vex and his surviving crew members shared everything they knew. They had studied Devourer tactics while fighting their losing battle. Their information filled in gaps in Queen Xylara's intelligence. During the Festival of Conquest, they bring ships from all over their empire back to Kethmaran, Vex explained. The sky becomes crowded with vessels. If you could disguise your ship properly, you might slip in unnoticed. One of Vex's crew members, an engineer named Kira, offered to help modify their ship systems. "I know how to make Devourer transponder codes," she said. "My people captured one of their communication devices before our world fell." Jake felt hope growing in his chest. "Would you be willing to help us create a distraction on Kethmaran?" Vex's eyes burned with anger and grief. "My world is gone. My family is dead. If there is a chance to hurt the Devourers, I will take it gladly." For the next 3 days, the survivors worked together to prepare for their mission. Kira and Tony modified the ship systems to broadcast proper Devourer identification codes. Amy learned basic Devourer anatomy in case they needed medical information. Carlos practiced speaking their language until he could pass for one of their communication officers. Lisa studied flight patterns and learned how to pilot like a Devourer ship captain. The survivors taught her their combat maneuvers and formation flying techniques. On the 16th day, they finally saw Kethmaran ahead of them. Jake had thought he was prepared, but the reality was overwhelming. The planet was surrounded by thousands of ships, battle cruisers, destroyers, fighters, and massive carriers that looked like floating cities. "Festival ships," Vex confirmed. "They come here once a year to celebrate their victories and plan new conquests." Lisa activated the modified transponder codes, and their ship became just another vessel among thousands. They joined a convoy of ships heading toward the planet's surface. "Remember the plan," Jake said to his crew. "Lisa will land us in the main spaceport. Vex and his people will create explosions in the power grid on the east side of the city. Carlos will broadcast fake emergency messages to confuse their communications. Tony will jam their security frequencies in the Temple District." Jake touched the cloaking device on his arm. "I'll have 6 hours to get into the temple, find the Crown of Sorrows, and get back out. If I'm not back by then, leave without me." "We're not leaving you, Captain," Amy said firmly. "That's an order," Jake replied. "If this mission fails, someone needs to get back to Earth and warn them what's coming." They entered Kethmaran's atmosphere and saw the capital city spread out below them like a metal cancer across the landscape. Dark towers reached up toward the sky, connected by bridges and transportation tubes. Massive factories pumped smoke into the air, and Jake could see armies of Devourer soldiers marching through the streets. The spaceport was chaos. Thousands of ships were landing and taking off, carrying warriors and supplies from across the empire. Festival banners hung from the control towers, celebrating another year of conquest and destruction. Lisa found them a landing pad near the edge of the spaceport. As they powered down their engines, Jake could see the Temple of Victories in the distance. It was a black pyramid that seemed to swallow light, standing like a monument to evil in the heart of the city. "The temple is 2 miles from here," Jake said, checking his equipment one final time. "I'll need to move fast and stay hidden." Vex handed him a small device. "This is a scanner that can detect Devourer patrol routes. It will help you avoid their guards." Jake activated the cloaking device and felt a strange tingling sensation as it powered up. When he looked down at himself, he could barely see his own body. "Good luck, Captain," Lisa said. Jake slipped out of the ship and into the crowded spaceport. The cloaking device worked perfectly. Devourers walked right past him without noticing. But he had to be careful not to bump into anyone or make noise. The streets of the capital city were filled with celebrating warriors. Jake had to dodge between groups of drunk Devourers who were boasting about their recent victories. He heard them talking about worlds they had destroyed, civilizations they had wiped out, and plans for future conquests. As he got closer to the temple, Jake could see it was even more impressive than Queen Xylara's images had shown. The black stone seemed to pulse with its own inner darkness, and strange symbols glowed along its surface. Guards stood at every entrance, tall devourers in heavy armor carrying weapons that hummed with energy. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were the elite Praetorians, the best warriors their species had ever produced. Jake checked the scanner Vex had given him. It showed patrol routes and guard positions around the temple. He found a maintenance entrance on the east side that had fewer guards. Just as he reached the entrance, explosions lit up the sky on the far side of the city. Vex and his people had begun their distraction. Emergency alarms started wailing, and Jake could see guards being pulled away from the temple to respond to the apparent attack. Carlos's voice crackled through fake emergency broadcasts, reporting multiple attacks across the city. The confusion spread quickly as Devourer commanders tried to figure out what was happening. Jake smiled grimly as he slipped through the maintenance entrance. The hardest part was just beginning, but so far everything was going according to plan. Inside the temple, he found himself in a maze of corridors lined with trophies from conquered worlds. And somewhere in this monument to destruction waited the crown of sorrows. Inside the Temple of Victories, Jake found himself in a nightmare museum of conquest. The corridors were lined with glass cases containing artifacts from destroyed worlds. He saw beautiful artwork, ancient weapons, and religious symbols from dozens of different civilizations. Each item represented a culture that no longer existed. Jake forced himself to focus on the mission. According to Queen Xylara's information, the Crown of Sorrows would be in the deepest chamber of the temple. He followed the scanner's directions through a maze of hallways and staircases that led ever downward. The temple was not empty. Even with the distraction outside, robed devourer priests moved through the halls, tending to their grotesque collection. Jake had to be careful to avoid them as he made his way deeper into the structure. After an hour of careful movement, he reached the heart of the temple. The chamber was circular and huge, with a domed ceiling covered in carvings that seemed to move in the flickering light. In the center, on a pedestal surrounded by energy fields, sat the Crown of Sorrows. Jake gasped when he saw it. The crown was more beautiful than anything he had ever imagined. It looked like it was made from crystallized starlight, with gems that pulsed with inner fire. Even from across the room, he could feel power radiating from it. But between him and the crown stood the most dangerous obstacle yet. 6 Praetorian guards in full battle armor patrolled the chamber. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were each 8 feet tall and moved with the grace of trained killers. Their weapons could cut through steel like paper. Jake studied their patrol pattern and waited for his chance. The guards moved in a careful routine, but there was a moment every few minutes when their paths took them all to the far side of the chamber. He would have less than 30 seconds to reach the crown and disable its protective systems. While he waited, Jake noticed something strange. The crown seemed to be calling to him somehow. Images flashed through his mind. Visions of the Vorthak Empire at its height, massive battles in space, and finally the terrible last days when the Devourers overran their worlds. He saw Queen Xylara as she had been long ago, younger and surrounded by her people. He felt their despair as their empire crumbled and their hope died. But he also sensed something else, a message left behind in the crown itself. The Praetorian guards moved to the far side of the chamber and Jake made his move. He sprinted across the room, his cloaked form invisible to the guards. Tony had taught him how to disable security systems, and his hands moved quickly over the control panel protecting the crown. The energy fields around the pedestal flickered and died. Jake reached for the Crown of Sorrows, and the moment his fingers touched it, his mind exploded with visions. He saw the true history of the Vorthak Empire. They had not been conquered because they were weak. They had been betrayed from within. Some of their own people had made a deal with the Devourers, trading the Empire's secrets for promises of power. But he also saw something else. The crown was not just a symbol, it was a key. The Stellar Forge could not function without it. Queen Xylara had never been able to use the weapon because the crown was missing. Stop right there, human. Jake spun around and saw the largest devourer he had ever imagined. This creature was 10 feet tall and covered in scars that told of 1,000 battles. His armor was black and gold, marking him as someone of great importance. I am Korath, High Devourer and Supreme Commander of our armies, the massive warrior said. We have been expecting someone to come for the crown eventually. Jake's cloaking device flickered and failed. He stood exposed in the chamber holding the crown of sorrows while 6 Praetorian guards surrounded him. "You knew we were coming?" Jake asked, trying to buy time. Korath laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The last queen of the Vorthak could never resist a dramatic gesture. "We knew she would eventually find someone foolish enough to attempt this theft." The High Devourer drew a massive sword that crackled with energy. "You humans have impressed us. Your little distraction outside was cleverly planned, but did you really think we would leave our most precious trophy unguarded?" Jake looked around the chamber desperately. The guards were closing in and there was no way he could fight his way out. But he noticed something. The explosions and alarms outside were getting closer. His crew was fighting their way toward the temple. "Why keep the crown at all?" Jake asked, still stalling for time. "You've already defeated the Vorthak Empire." Korath's eyes gleamed with cruel pleasure. "Because it reminds us that even the mightiest can fall. Your species will learn this lesson soon enough when we reach your worlds." Jake felt anger burning in his chest. "We're not as easy to conquer as you think, no?" Korath raised his sword. "Then prove it." The High Devourer struck with incredible speed, but Jake had been ready. He rolled aside and the energy blade smashed into the floor where he had been standing. Chunks of stone flew through the air. Jake had no weapon that could match the Devourer's sword, but he had something more important: human cleverness. As Korath swung again, Jake grabbed a piece of fallen stone and threw it at the chamber's light fixtures. The room plunged into darkness, except for the glow from the crown. Jake used the confusion to dodge between the pillars supporting the dome above. The Praetorian guards fired their weapons, but they hit each other more often than they hit him. Korath roared in fury and swung his sword in wide arcs, trying to cut Jake down. But in his anger, he struck one of the main support pillars. The ancient stone cracked and began to crumble. "The ceiling!" one of the guards shouted. "He's trying to bring down the temple." Jake saw his chance. He threw more stones at the damaged pillar, and cracks spread up toward the dome. The entire structure groaned and shuddered. "You're going to kill us all," Korath yelled. "Maybe," Jake replied, "but I'm taking this crown with me." He ran toward a section of wall that was beginning to collapse. As stones fell around him, Jake dove through a gap that opened up and found himself in a corridor outside the main chamber. Behind him, he could hear the terrible sound of the dome collapsing. Dust and debris filled the air, and emergency alarms screamed throughout the temple. Jake ran through the corridors as the entire structure shook around him. He could hear his crew fighting their way through the temple's outer defenses. Lisa's voice crackled through his communicator. "Captain, we're at the main entrance. Where are you?" "Coming your way," Jake shouted back. "Get ready to run." He burst out of the temple just as Tony detonated charges that brought down the front wall. Amy and Carlos were waiting with weapons drawn, holding off a group of Devourer soldiers. "Did you get it?" Lisa asked as they ran toward their ship. Jake held up the crown of sorrows, which was still glowing with inner light. "I got it. But we need to leave now." Behind them, the Temple of Victories was collapsing in on itself. Ancient stones crashed down, burying centuries of stolen treasures. And somewhere in the rubble, the High Devourer was probably still alive and very, very angry. The crew of the New Horizon ran through the chaotic streets as Devourer forces converged on their position. The real test was just beginning. They had the crown, but now they had to escape from the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. The escape from Keth-Moran was the most terrifying experience of Jake's life. Devourer forces poured through the streets like an angry swarm, hunting for the humans who had dared to steal their most precious trophy. Jake clutched the crown of sorrows as his crew fought their way back to the spaceport. Vex and his surviving aliens had kept their ship ready for a quick departure. The moment Jake and his crew reached the landing pad, Lisa fired up the engines while Tony and Carlos sealed the hatches. "Go, go, go," Jake shouted. Lisa pushed the ship's engines to their limits, lifting off just as Devourer fighters began strafing the spaceport. The Vorthak ship climbed toward space while enemy fire lit up the sky around them. "They're launching everything they have," Amy reported from the sensor station. "Hundreds of ships are taking off after us." Jake looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. The entire Devourer fleet was mobilizing to hunt them down. They had maybe a 5-minute head start before the fastest enemy ships caught up with them. "Can we outrun them?" he asked Lisa. "Not for long," she replied grimly. "They have ships designed for pursuit. We're carrying too much weight from the modifications. Vex spoke up from his position at the weapons console. Captain Morrison, my people have decided something. We want to buy you time to escape. Jake turned to look at the alien commander. What do you mean? Our ships are damaged and slow, Vex explained. We cannot outrun the Devourers anyway. But we can delay them long enough for you to reach the hyperspace jump point. Amy's eyes filled with tears. Vex, that's suicide. The alien commander smiled sadly. My world is gone. My family is dead. At least this way our deaths will mean something. The Crown of Sorrows must reach Queen Zylara. Jake wanted to argue, but he knew Vex was right. The humans alone could not fight off hundreds of Devourer ships. But if Vex's people could delay the pursuit even for a few minutes, it might be enough. Thank you, Jake said quietly. Vex nodded and opened a communication channel to his remaining ships. All vessels, this is your final mission. We will hold the enemy here while the humans escape. For our fallen worlds and our lost families. The alien survivors turned their damaged ships around and flew straight into the oncoming Devourer fleet. Jake watched on the main screen as they fought with desperate courage. Their small ships diving between the massive enemy warships like insects attacking giants. Jump point in 90 seconds, Lisa announced. The Devourer fleet was closing fast, but Vex's sacrifice was working. The enemy ships had to slow down to deal with the attacking survivors, and their formation became scattered and confused. But Jake knew the delay would not last long. The Devourers had overwhelming numbers and Vex's ships were already dying one by one. 60 seconds to jump point, Lisa called out. On the screen, Jake saw the last of Vex's ships explode in a ball of fire. The alien commander's voice came over the radio one final time. Remember us, humans. Remember what the Devourers took from us. Then the communication cut out and the enemy fleet resumed its pursuit. 30 seconds. The fastest Devourer fighters were catching up now. Jake could see weapons fire reaching out toward them as the enemy ships closed the distance. Jump, Lisa shouted. The ship lurched as it entered hyperspace, leaving the Devourer fleet far behind. Jake collapsed into his chair, exhausted and overwhelmed by what they had accomplished and what it had cost. The journey back to Queen Zylara's ship took 3 days. During that time, Amy made a disturbing discovery while examining the Crown of Sorrows. Jake, you need to see this, she said, calling him to her medical station where she had been scanning the crown. What is it? The crown isn't just a symbol, Amy explained. It's some kind of key or control device. The metal contains the same energy signatures as the Stellar Forge. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You mean the weapon doesn't work without it? That's exactly what I mean. Queen Zylara could never have used the Stellar Forge even if she wanted to. The crown was necessary to activate it. Carlos looked up from his communication station. So the whole time she was telling us the truth. She really couldn't just give us the weapon. When they finally returned to Queen Zylara's massive ship, Jake carried the Crown of Sorrows to her throne room. The ancient queen was waiting for them and her expression was both sad and proud. You have done the impossible, she said as Jake placed the crown at her feet. But I can see in your faces that victory came at a great cost. Jake told her about Vex and his people, and how they had sacrificed themselves to make the escape possible. Queen Zylara listened in silence, and when he finished, she closed her eyes and spoke a few words in her own language. A prayer for the brave dead, she explained. They will be remembered as heroes. The queen picked up the Crown of Sorrows and held it gently in her 4 hands. This belonged to my father, the last emperor of the Vorthak. When he died, I thought our legacy died with him. But perhaps I was wrong. She looked at Jake with those deep, starry eyes. You have proven that humanity possesses the qualities my people lost. Courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to fight for others rather than yourselves. The Stellar Forge is yours. Queen Zylara led them to the deepest part of her ship where the Stellar Forge waited. Jake had expected to see some kind of massive weapon, but instead he found a small chamber containing what looked like a crystalline sphere no bigger than his fist. This is it? Tony asked in amazement. Power does not always require size, the queen replied. She placed the Crown of Sorrows into a special receptacle, and the sphere began to glow with inner light. With this device, you can create new stars to light dark worlds or collapse enemy suns to end threats to the galaxy. But remember, such power corrupts those who use it carelessly. Jake took the Stellar Forge and felt its weight, both physical and moral. How do we know we won't become like the Devourers ourselves? Queen Zylara smiled. Because you asked that question. The Devourers would never doubt themselves. My people forgot to question their actions, and it led to our downfall. As long as humans remember to doubt, to question, and to sacrifice for others, you will remain worthy of this power. The Queen's ship began to power down around them as her ancient systems finally gave out. My time is ending, she said peacefully. But yours is just beginning. Use the forge wisely, and perhaps the galaxy will know peace again. As Queen Zalara closed her eyes for the final time, Jake felt the full weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They had the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, but they also had the burden of using it correctly. The journey back to Earth took weeks, and during that time Jake thought about everything that had happened. They had gained the power to protect humanity from the Devourers, but they had also learned that power alone was not enough. It was how that power was used that mattered. When Earth finally appeared on their main screen, Jake realized that their real journey was just beginning. The Stellar Forge could protect humanity from external threats, but the greatest danger would always come from within, from the temptation to use their power for conquest rather than protection. He looked at the Crown of Sorrows, which now rested in a place of honor on their bridge. It would serve as a reminder of the cost of power and the responsibility that came with it. The galaxy was full of species like the Devourers who used strength to dominate others. But perhaps with wisdom and courage, humanity could show them a different way. Queen Zalara had given them more than a weapon. She had given them a chance to be better than those who came before. As the New Horizon entered Earth's atmosphere, Jake knew that the hardest battles were still ahead. But for the first time since leaving on this mission, he felt hope for the future.